Imagine digging in the ground and finding a dinosaur so well preserved that its skin, armor, and even its last meal are still there. This is exactly what happened with Borealopelta markmitchelli. Borealopelta, which means northern shield, was built like a living tank, yet it also hid in plain sight with clever camouflage. Discovered by chance in a massive mine, this creature's fossil became one of the best preserved dinosaur specimens ever found. In March 2011, miners were working in a large open pit mine in western Canada when a worker's machine struck something unexpectedly hard. Instead of the usual rock, the bucket came up, holding brownish, bumpy stone pieces that looked like scales and armor. The mining crew quickly realized this was not an ordinary rock. It was a dinosaur fossil. Paleontologists were called in to carefully investigate. To everyone's astonishment, the fossil turned out to be a new species of armored dinosaur, later named Borealopelta markmitchelli. It was named in honor of Mark Mitchell, the technician who spent more than 5 years painstakingly freeing the dinosaur's remains from the hard rock. His dedication was so great that the creature now carries his name. What made this discovery so extraordinary was how perfectly preserved the dinosaur was. Usually, fossils are just mineralized bones, but this dinosaur was different. When it was uncovered, paleontologists found large portions of its skin, armor plates, and even its gut contents, stomach contents, intact. It was almost like a dinosaur mummy, a three-dimensional snapshot of the animal as it was in life. The site where it was found had previously only turned up fossils of ancient marine reptiles, so finding a land-dwelling dinosaur there was a huge surprise. Right away, scientists wondered, how did a land herbivore, plant-eater, end up buried in what used to be a seafloor? We'll get to that mystery soon. Borealopelta was a heavy, four-legged herbivorous dinosaur covered in bony armor. In life, it stretched about 5.5 meters long, 18 feet, from nose to tail, and weighed roughly 1.2 to 1.3 tons, about as much as a small car. To get an idea of its build, think of a gigantic armadillo or a living tank with a low-slung body. Its back and sides were covered in hard, knobby plates and spikes made of bone, called osteoderms, giving it the look of a walking fortress. One scientist described its appearance as almost like a giant pineapple with legs, because its tough armor and spikes stuck out in all directions. On its neck and over its shoulders, Borealopelta bore extremely long, pointed spikes. These likely made it difficult for any predator to bite down on it without getting poked. Even its face had protective armor, almost like a natural helmet. However, unlike its famous cousin Ankylosaurus, Borealopelta did not have a club on its tail. It belonged to a branch of armored dinosaurs called nodosaurids, which favored spikes and armor over tail clubs. Despite looking like a tank, Borealopelta was very much alive and needed to eat and move. It walked on 4 sturdy legs and likely had a somewhat slow, lumbering gait. Imagine how a giant tortoise or an elephant moves, but lower to the ground. Its body was wide and heavy, and its center of gravity was low. This would help it stay balanced if a predator tried to flip it over. Thick scales and keratin, the same material as our fingernails and hair, covered its bony plates. In fact, the fossil was so well preserved that scientists found the keratin sheaths that once covered its spikes and armor plates, as well as patches of scaly skin. These tough keratin coverings would have made the armor even bulkier and more formidable, much like a horn covering the bony core on a rhinoceros horn. The skin impressions show a pebbly texture, suggesting Borealopelta's skin looked like a lizard's or crocodile's hide, thick, scaly, and protective. To picture Borealopelta in life, you might compare it to an enormous armored plant-eater, like a cross between a porcupine and a turtle, though it's not directly related to either. It had the porcupine's idea of spikes for defense, and a turtle's idea of a shell, armor, for protection, all rolled into one giant package. Its head was low to the ground, perfect for munching on ferns and low-growing plants. In fact, scientists were able to analyze its stomach contents, and discovered that this dinosaur was a picky eater. Its last meal was mostly ferns. This makes sense because in the early Cretaceous period, 110 million years ago, when Borealopelta lived, the landscape was rich with ferns, cycads, and conifer plants, and flowering plants were just starting to become common. Surprisingly, though, armor was not Borealopelta's only line of defense. This dinosaur also had a form of camouflage on its body. Yes, an animal as large as a rhinoceros with spikes like a porcupine still tried to hide. Scientists studied organic molecules preserved in the fossil's skin and armor, and found evidence that Borealopelta had a color pattern called countershading. Countershading means the animal's underside was lighter in color, probably a pale or whitish hue, while its back was darker. In Borealopelta's case, a rusty red-brown color. Many animals today have this color pattern. For example, deer, gazelles, and even sharks use countershading. When seen from above, their dark tops blend with the ground, and when seen from below or from a lower angle, their light bellies blend with the bright sky or water surface. A predator looking down from a higher slope might see a dark, back against the ground, and a predator at a lower angle would see a lighter belly against the sunlit sky, making the dinosaur look flatter and harder to pick out. Why would Borealopelta need camouflage and armor? The likely answer is formidable predators. The early Cretaceous period was full of danger for a slow-moving plant eater. Large theropod dinosaurs, basically the T-Rex-style meat-eaters, though T-Rex itself appeared later. In Borealopelta's time and location, there might have been big carnivores, such as Acrocanthosaurus, or other big hunters. Imagine something like a 30-foot-long cousin of T-Rex with sharp teeth and claws. These predators probably had keen vision, possibly even color vision, meaning they could spot prey by sight. If a predator managed to turn it over or get to its softer parts, Borealopelta could be in trouble. So, being invisible was an additional safety net. Its spikes and armor might dissuade or injure a predator, but its camouflage could help prevent an attack from happening in the first place by making it less visible in the dim Cretaceous forests. How did this land-dwelling armored dinosaur end up in an ancient sea? And why is it so incredibly well preserved? Scientists have pieced together a dramatic scenario to explain this. They believe that Borealopelta's journey to the sea began when the animal died near a river or coast, possibly during a flood, or after being swept away by a river. Back in the early Cretaceous, the area where it lived was periodically flooded by a shallow inland sea. So, Borealopelta might have been carried out into the open water after death. Once in the water, the dinosaur's massive body likely sank to the seafloor rather quickly. Normally, dead animals can bloat with gases and float for a while. In fact, earlier ideas suggested the carcass could have bobbed at sea for days or weeks before sinking. However, Borealopelta's body was extremely heavy in the front, all that armor on its back and neck. This front-heavy design means that when it lost buoyancy, it probably flipped upside down as it sank. The dinosaur was literally in the right place at the right time to become a fossil. Over millions of years, the magic of fossilization took over. Minerals in the water gradually replaced the organic material in Borealopelta's skin and armor, turning it to stone while retaining even fine details. Its armor and spikes were all in place, and even the ghostly remnants of its skin color patterns were detectable. This spectacular preservation is why Borealopelta is often touted as the best preserved armored dinosaur in the world.